Today I want to talk to you about a powerful truth that we often overlook in our pursuit of joy and fulfillment. Happiness is not by chance, but by choice. So many of us wait for the perfect moment, the right circumstances, or for other people to make us happy. But the reality is that happiness doesn't just arrive on its own. It is a conscious decision we must make each day. Happiness begins with our mindset. It is not something that happens to us by accident. It is something we create intentionally. It's easy to think that happiness is a result of external events, our achievements, our relationships, or even the material things we acquire. However, happiness is ultimately a reflection of how we choose to perceive the world around us. Nonetheless, what does this mean for you? It means that no matter what life throws at you, you have the power to decide how you respond. You can choose to focus on the good, to be grateful for what you have, and to stay optimistic in the face of challenges. The more you embrace this mindset, the more you'll find that happiness is within your control. You see, we are the architects of our own happiness. Yes, external circumstances can impact us, but how we internalize and respond to those circumstances is what shapes our emotional state. It's not about waiting for life to give us something to smile about. It's about choosing to smile even when life feels tough. Now, one of the most powerful practices in this journey is gratitude. When you take the time to acknowledge the good in your life, even in small ways, it shifts your energy. Gratitude is a choice that opens the door to a more positive outlook. It allows you to find peace in the present moment, and in turn, it invites happiness into your life. Mindfulness plays a crucial role in this as well. By being present, you can become more attuned to the simple joys in your daily routine. Whether it's savoring a warm cup of coffee or relishing a quiet walk in nature, being present is one of the simplest ways to choose happiness in any given moment. And finally, happiness comes when we set clear intentions for our lives. The choices we make today, the actions we take, and the energy we put out into the world will determine our long-term happiness. Every choice you make is either bringing you closer to or further from the joy you deserve. Happiness is not something that happens by accident. It's a choice. It's the choice to look for joy in every moment, to respond to challenges with grace, and to live with gratitude in your heart. The life you want, the happiness you seek, begins with one simple decision: to choose it. Happiness is not something that simply happens to us. It is a choice, a decision that we make each and every day. We often hear people say, "I'll be happy when," or "I'll be happy if." These thoughts imply that happiness is something that we are waiting for, something that will arrive at a particular moment in time when the circumstances are just right. But the truth is, happiness is not a destination or an event. It is a way of living. It is a decision to see the world through a lens of positivity and to embrace life's challenges with an open heart. We have all experienced those moments when life seems to align perfectly, when everything falls into place and happiness feels effortless. In those times, it's easy to believe that happiness comes as a result of good fortune or external factors. However, when those moments fade, we often find ourselves feeling unfulfilled again. Why? Because true happiness does not rely on external circumstances. One day, you are dug with anxiety. You have a telephone call. It is a mindset that comes from within, a decision we make regardless of what is happening in the world around us. The power of choosing happiness begins with our mindset. How we view the world, how we respond to setbacks, and how we manage our thoughts directly impact our emotional state. If we wait for life to give us reasons to be happy, we may find ourselves constantly disappointed, waiting for the perfect situation that never arrives. Instead, we can choose to cultivate a mindset of happiness by focusing on the things that bring us joy, no matter how small they may seem. This choice doesn't mean that we ignore challenges or pretend that difficult emotions don't exist. We all face adversity, and it is natural to experience moments of sadness, frustration, or anger. However, choosing happiness means that we don't allow these negative emotions to define us. We choose to rise above them, to see them as temporary, and to look for the silver lining. We decide that despite the difficulties, we can find ways to be content and fulfilled. One of the most profound ways to make happiness a choice is through the practice of gratitude. Gratitude is the intentional act of recognizing the good things in our lives, no matter how simple they may be. When we consciously choose to focus on what we have rather than what we lack, we shift our perspective. Gratitude allows us to reframe our situation, finding joy in the present moment instead of waiting for an ideal future. This shift in focus doesn't diminish the challenges we face. It simply reminds us that there is always something to be grateful for, no matter how difficult life may seem. Another key element of choosing happiness is accepting personal responsibility. So often we blame others or external circumstances for our unhappiness. We might say, "I would be happy if I had a better job," or "I would be happy if my relationships were different." While external factors do play a role in our lives, true happiness comes when we take responsibility for our own emotional well-being. We must realize that we are the ones who have the power to shape our happiness. No one else can give it to us. We must decide to create it for ourselves. This sense of personal responsibility means acknowledging that we have control over how we respond to life's challenges. We can choose how we react when things don't go our way. Instead of becoming overwhelmed by negativity, we can choose to face difficulties with resilience and optimism. This doesn't mean that every moment will be filled with joy, but it does mean that we can always choose to find meaning, growth, and learning even in difficult times. Our reactions, thoughts, and behaviors are entirely within our control, and this control is what ultimately allows us to choose happiness. Happiness is not a static goal, nor is it something that we can only experience after achieving a certain level of success or accomplishment. It is a dynamic and evolving state of being that requires continuous effort and awareness. Just like any other choice, happiness is something we need to actively decide every day. There will be days when it feels easier, and days when it feels harder, but the decision to prioritize our happiness remains in our hands. Each day presents an opportunity to choose joy, to focus on the positives, and to find gratitude in the midst of life's ups and downs. In the end, happiness is not something that we can wait for or hope for. It is not a fleeting moment that we have no control over. Instead, it is a conscious choice, a daily commitment to focusing on the good, embracing challenges with a positive mindset, and taking responsibility for our own well-being. When we make this choice, we empower ourselves to live more fulfilling, joyful lives. Happiness is not by chance, it is by choice. Our perspective plays a crucial role in shaping our happiness. It's not just about what happens to us, it's about how we choose to interpret and respond to those events. Our perspective is like a filter through which we view the world, and it influences everything: how we interact with others, how we handle challenges, and how we experience the day-to-day moments of life. By intentionally shifting our perspective, we can significantly enhance our sense of happiness. Imagine two people facing the same difficult situation. One person might look at the problem and feel overwhelmed, thinking it's an insurmountable obstacle that will derail their progress. The other person might look at the same situation and see it as an opportunity for growth, learning, or even as a temporary challenge that will soon pass. The difference between these two responses lies not in the situation itself, but in their perspective. The individual who views the challenge as an opportunity is likely to feel less stressed and more empowered, while the one who sees only the obstacle may feel defeated and anxious. This is where the power of perspective comes in. It's important to recognize that our happiness doesn't depend on external circumstances, but on how we choose to perceive those circumstances. While we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. And how we respond often determines how happy we feel in any given moment. Autonomy. If we choose to see challenges as opportunities for growth, setbacks as learning experiences, and disappointments as stepping stones to something better, we can navigate life with greater ease and joy. A powerful tool for shifting perspective is the practice of reframing. Reframing is the process of taking a negative or stressful thought and turning it into something more positive. For example, if you're facing a tough project at work and feel overwhelmed, instead of focusing on how difficult it is, you can reframe your thinking by recognizing that this challenge will help you build valuable skills. Experience it. You might remind yourself that by overcoming this difficulty, you'll gain confidence and experience that will benefit you in the future. This simple shift in perspective can transform your experience of the situation from something burdensome to something empowering. Another way to shift our perspective is by focusing on the present moment. Often, we get caught up in worrying about the future or dwelling on the past. We think about what might happen, what we could have done differently, or what we want to achieve down the road. While having goals and plans is important, constantly focusing on the future or regretting the past can rob us of our happiness in the present. Mindfulness, or the practice of being fully present and engaged in the moment, helps us to shift our perspective away from these distractions and into the here and now. When we focus on the present moment, we begin to appreciate the small joys in life. The feeling of sunshine on our skin, the sound of laughter with friends, the warmth of a cup of tea. These moments of mindfulness might seem insignificant, but they add up. When we take time to appreciate the present, we invite more happiness into our lives. It's not about waiting for the big moments or the future to bring happiness. It's about choosing to be happy with what is happening right now. Manifest your future to bring happiness. It's about choosing to be happy with what is happening right now. Changing our perspective also means being kind and compassionate with ourselves. We often expect perfection from ourselves and judge ourselves harshly when we make mistakes. But instead of criticizing ourselves, we can choose to view our mistakes as part of the learning process. When we shift our perspective to one of self-compassion, we remove the pressure to be perfect and create space for growth, progress, and happiness. Self-compassion allows us to embrace our flaws and see them as opportunities for improvement rather than reasons to feel inadequate or unhappy. Adopting a more optimistic perspective can significantly increase our happiness. Optimism is the belief that, no matter what happens, good things are possible. It's the ability to look for the silver lining in any situation. Optimists don't ignore the difficulties of life, but they focus on solutions and the positive potential that exists in every circumstance. Meanwhile, by choosing to approach life with optimism, we train our minds to seek out the good, the beautiful, and the hopeful, rather than fixating on the negative. This shift can help us feel more empowered and less anxious about the future. Perspective is not just a passive experience, it's an active choice. Every moment, we have the opportunity to decide how we view the world. We can choose to see challenges as opportunities, to focus on the present instead of the past or future, and to approach ourselves and others with kindness and compassion. Our perspective is one of the most powerful tools we have in our pursuit of happiness, and it is within our control to change it at any time. By consciously choosing a positive perspective, we create a foundation for happiness that is not dependent on external factors, but on how we choose to see and interact with the world around us. Taking personal responsibility for our happiness is one of the most empowering decisions we can make in our lives. Too often we find ourselves blaming external circumstances or other people for our unhappiness. We may tell ourselves that if only we had a different job, a different relationship, or more money, we would be happy. But the truth is, happiness is not something that can be handed to us by the outside world. It is something that we create from within. By accepting responsibility for our own happiness, we reclaim control over our emotional state and begin to understand that we have the power to shape our experiences. When we take personal responsibility for our happiness, we stop waiting for others or for life's circumstances to change in order for us to feel content. We recognize that our happiness is a result of the choices we make, the mindset we cultivate, and the actions we take. Instead of being passive recipients of whatever life throws our way, we become active creators of our own joy. This shift is incredibly liberating because it means that we no longer have to depend on the approval of others or wait for the perfect situation to be happy. We can choose to be happy right now in the present moment, regardless of external circumstances. Secure. Taking responsibility for our happiness also means letting go of the tendency to blame others for our emotional state. It's easy to think, I would be happy if my partner were more understanding, or I would be happy if my boss gave me more recognition. While external factors can certainly influence our emotions, no one else is responsible for how we feel. We alone are in control of our reactions, thoughts, and behaviors. When we place the responsibility for our happiness in the hands of others, we give away our power. We put ourselves in a position where we are dependent on the actions of others to feel good about ourselves. But when we take responsibility for our happiness, we no longer allow others to determine our emotional state. Instead, we empower ourselves to create the feelings of joy, peace, and fulfillment that we desire. Andy Keller, Beyond Getting Rich. This does not mean that we should ignore the impact that others have on our lives. Relationships, work environments, and external circumstances do play a role in shaping our experiences. However, what it does mean is that we choose how we respond to these influences. If a person or situation is causing us distress, we can choose to set boundaries, communicate our needs, or even walk away if necessary. We don't have to passively accept unhappiness because of how others treat us or the circumstances we find ourselves in. We always have the option to take action to improve our situation, or at the very least, to adjust our mindset so that we are no longer negatively affected by it. After all, there's another way. Personal responsibility also requires us to be honest with ourselves about the choices we make. We cannot blame the world for our unhappiness if we are not willing to take responsibility for the decisions that led us to where we are. If we are unhappy with our current situation, we must ask ourselves, what choices have I made that have contributed to this? Am I settling for less than I deserve? Am I procrastinating or avoiding taking action on the things that matter to me? First, when we take ownership of our decisions, we can begin to see where changes need to be made. We can identify patterns of behavior that are not serving us and replace them with new, more empowering choices that will lead us toward the happiness we seek. Another important aspect of personal responsibility is the ability to forgive ourselves. Many of us carry guilt or regret about past mistakes, which can prevent us from moving forward and finding happiness in the present. But true responsibility means letting go of self-blame and accepting that we are human. We all make mistakes, and that is part of the learning process. Instead of holding on to the past and allowing it to dictate our happiness, we can choose to forgive ourselves, learn from our experiences, and move forward with greater wisdom and resilience. Self-forgiveness is a crucial step in taking control of our happiness because it allows us to free ourselves from the emotional weight of past mistakes and embrace the possibility of a brighter future. When we take personal responsibility for our happiness, we also become more mindful of how we spend our time and energy. We stop waiting for happiness to come to us, and we actively seek out the things and people that bring us joy. We recognize that our time is precious, and that we have the power to choose where to invest it. Whether it's pursuing a passion, spending time with loved ones, or engaging in activities that nurture our well-being, we become intentional about creating a life that supports our happiness. This mindset shift is powerful because it helps us focus on what we can control, our own choices, rather than dwelling on things that are beyond our influence. In the end, personal responsibility for our happiness is about taking ownership of our emotional well-being. It's about recognizing that we are the ones who have the power to create the life we desire. By letting go of blame, making conscious choices, and taking proactive steps, we can cultivate lasting happiness that is not dependent on anyone else or external circumstances. When we embrace personal responsibility, we empower ourselves to live more fulfilling, joyful lives, regardless of what is happening around us. One of the most transformative aspects of choosing happiness is the ability to set boundaries in our lives. Boundaries are not just about limiting others, but about taking control of our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. When we allow ourselves to set healthy boundaries, we create space for happiness to thrive. Without boundaries, we may find ourselves overwhelmed, stressed, or resentful, and these emotions can prevent us from experiencing the joy and peace we deserve. Learning to set boundaries means recognizing what we need in order to protect our happiness, and having the courage to enforce those needs, no matter what. Boundaries are essential in all areas of life, whether in relationships, work, or personal time. They allow us to maintain a sense of self-respect and preserve our emotional energy. Without clear boundaries, we can easily become caught up in the demands and expectations of others, often at the expense of our own well-being. We may find ourselves saying yes to things we don't want to do, or neglecting our own needs in favor of others' desires. This may lead to feelings of frustration, burnout, and resentment. However, when we set boundaries, we create space for our own needs and priorities to take center stage. We begin to honor ourselves and our right to be happy. Setting boundaries is not about being selfish. It's about being self-aware. It's about understanding that in order to show up fully for others, we must first take care of ourselves. Boundaries help us conserve our energy and focus on what truly matters. By saying no when we need to, we are making room for the things that bring us joy, fulfillment, and peace. For example, if a work project is causing you stress and negatively impacting your well-being, setting a boundary might mean asking for an extension or delegating tasks to someone else. If a friend is consistently draining your energy with negative conversations, setting a boundary might mean limiting the time you spend with that person, or politely redirecting the topic of conversation. These actions may feel uncomfortable at first, but they are essential in preserving your happiness. A key aspect of boundary setting is learning to say no. Many of us struggle with saying no because we fear disappointing others or being perceived as rude. However, saying no is a powerful tool in creating space for our own happiness. When we say yes to everything, we stretch ourselves too thin and risk losing sight of our own needs. By saying no when something doesn't align with our values or priorities, we are asserting our right to protect our time and energy. Saying no is not a rejection of others. It's a form of self-respect that allows us to honor what's truly important to us. Another important aspect of setting boundaries is recognizing that not everyone will understand or appreciate them. In fact, some people may push back or try to manipulate you into ignoring your boundaries. This is where self-awareness and self-assertiveness come into play. It's important to stay firm in your decision to protect your happiness, even when others may not be supportive. Remember that your happiness is your responsibility, and you have the right to set boundaries that serve your well-being. You do not need to justify your boundaries to anyone. They are yours to define and enforce. The more you practice setting boundaries, the more comfortable and confident you will become in maintaining them. Setting boundaries also requires us to recognize when we need to withdraw or create distance from certain situations or relationships. It's easy to become entangled in unhealthy dynamics that drain our energy or undermine our happiness. However, when we take a step back and evaluate these situations, we can recognize when it's time to establish a boundary. This might mean ending a toxic relationship, taking a break from a stressful work environment, or simply distancing ourselves from people who consistently bring negativity into our lives. By making these tough but necessary decisions, we create space for healthier relationships, opportunities, and experiences that contribute to our happiness. Another important aspect of boundary setting is learning to communicate our needs clearly and respectfully. Setting a boundary is not about being aggressive or domineering. It's about being assertive in a way that respects both ourselves and others. Clear communication is essential to ensuring that others understand our limits and expectations. For instance, if you need more time for self-care, it's important to express that need to those around you in a way that is direct but kind. Setting boundaries does not mean we need to be confrontational or harsh. It simply means that we are taking responsibility for our own happiness and creating the conditions for it to flourish. The more we practice setting boundaries, the more empowered we become. We begin to recognize that we are worthy of respect, kindness, and understanding, and that we have the right to protect our happiness. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love, as it involves prioritizing our own well-being above external pressures or expectations. It's about taking control of our lives and ensuring that we are living in alignment with our values, desires, and needs. The ability to set boundaries is a critical component of happiness. By setting clear and healthy boundaries, we are not only protecting our emotional and physical energy, but also affirming our commitment to ourselves and our well-being. Boundaries allow us to live more authentically and fully, without the constant fear of overextending ourselves or sacrificing our happiness for others. The wonderful thing about boundaries is that they do not require us to give up anything. As long as we value and appreciate ourselves, we are making the commitment to ourselves and our well-being. When we embrace the power of boundaries, we open the door to a life that is more peaceful, fulfilling, and joyful.